Welcome everyone to scheduling, a key component to multilingual learner programming. By the way, pan flute music is one of my favorites, so I was glad I got to have that music to start my session. It's very calming and relaxing. My name is Shannon Smith. I'm a multilingual learner coach at Support Ed, and in this role, I get to provide professional learning and coaching to educators of multilingual learners, and I also provide technical assistance to school districts to strengthen their multilingual learner programming and instruction. So today, I know Jasmine already dropped it in the chat. Feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn, X, or even email. I always love to chat about programming. In this session, we'll have, you'll see these two different icons. We have materials available on the Padlet. Don't stress or worry about accessing those during the session. I know Jasmine will share some links with you that you can access, but those are there for you to look at after the session so that you can, follow along throughout this quick overview that's going to happen over this next 49 minutes. And we also have a few discussion activities, so you'll see that chat button. However, feel free to chat anytime with each other about what you're seeing and any ahas or takeaways that you have throughout the session. As I said, we're going to take an overview of scheduling by describing some considerations for strengthening multilingual learner programming, then exploring some strategies to strengthen scheduling for multilingual learners through some case studies, and then finally giving you a chance to set some goals to strengthen the scheduling in your multilingual learner programming. That was a lot of S's at one time. I didn't realize that when I practiced this earlier. As Diane and Sydney shared previously, all of our sessions resources, including this Padlet, is available directly within that session block of the presentation under that Padlet tab. And for some of you who are savvy with Padlet, you may already know about the little square that you can see in the upper right-hand side with the arrow. That'll make the Padlet shoot out to another window if you'd like to look at things a little bigger. But you can access the session materials, related tools, articles, and so much more on that Padlet, and it'll be available to you along with the replay for about 30 days following the symposium. And I know someone had gotten us started already, but if you haven't done so already, please share with us your name and role and what you're hoping to learn in this session today. It just gives us an idea of who our audience is in this session. I know we have tons of different people in different roles across the continent. I was going to say the United States, or the country, but we've got Canadians, so I branched it out. So it's nice to see who we have here compared to who we have at the symposium. And as you're sharing those roles and what you're hoping to learn, I think I'm going to shift gears and get us into some program design considerations. So one thing I wanted to do as we set out was really giving us a grounding in some considerations in our programming because that really lays the foundation for your scheduling. And it's always nice to see a variety of roles from teachers to directors who likes to schedule, who really want to look at how they can better schedule. So we're going to start with that program design, and your multilingual learner program design is comprised of two different parts: your program type or types and the instructional models you use within that program type. So when we think about program type, it's that unique structure with certain characteristics and components designed to meet specific goals to provide quality instruction for multilingual learners. And I'm seeing a lot of ENL, ESL, ELD teachers, Title III coordinators, EL directors. So you're very familiar with that three-pronged test established in Castaneda and Picard, which your program type fits that first prong where it needs to be based on sound educational theory. So within the EL Toolkit, the U.S. Department of Education outlines 4 program types that meet that first prong. And since you all are kind of our ML people, I'm going to give a brief overview of those program types. The first is dual language programs, which develop language and literacy in English and a partner language, where the academic content is taught in both languages. Transitional bilingual programs develop a basic literacy in ML's home language and gain with the purpose and goal of gaining full English language proficiency. Content instruction transitions from our ML's home language to English only instruction over time with the goal of exiting students into English only programming. And if you're familiar with transitional bilingual programming, or even if you're not, you might have heard of early exit and late exit programs, and that's just that time that they transition out. Structured English immersion programs develop English language proficiency and provide access to grade level content courses. And when we talk about giving access to grade level content courses, it may not be the same content courses that students are receiving in the general education course study guide. It might be precursors to that content instruction. So these programs are really designed for students to enroll for a very short amount of time before transitioning into general education content courses. And finally, I think what most people are most familiar with is our English language development programs, or ESL, ENL programs. And that's where we really focus on developing English language proficiency for multilingual learners to be successful in accessing their grade level content. It's that English language development is working in concert with the grade level content courses and curriculum. As we go through this section, I do want to make an important note that districts and schools, one, may use one of these types of program types, or they may use various different ones to create that program design. And different states have different guidance. So they may support all of these program types, or they may only support one or a few. And I see some people are just popping in, and that's okay. The meat and potatoes, I think, are coming a little later. So as we look more closely at the instructional models that fall under that ELD programming, feel free to share some of the instructional models you use, or if something shows up that you use regularly, feel free to do that and share that with us in the chat. So standalone ELD instruction, that's something that we see a lot of, especially at secondary level, and that's that ELD instruction taught by an ELD teacher in an ELD course, or that set time in another classroom. Some of you might hear that referred to as pull-out instruction, or it's that ELD course when you're at secondary. We have in-class supports, often referred to as push-in instruction, where the ELD teacher is providing that instruction within the classroom. And I'm seeing a lot of like SEI, ELD, dual immersion in the chat. Very interesting. I love seeing it all. So those in-class supports or push-in instruction is going to have that ELD instruction within the classroom. Co-teaching, that time where the ELD teacher and content teacher are teaching together, that integrated language and content instruction. I think sheltered English instruction, and I saw SEI in the chat. Sheltered English instruction is that integrated ELD and content instruction provided by a teacher that is either dually certified in content and ELD, or has experience teaching or some professional learning to teach students, our multilingual learners, to integrate that language into content. Again, each state has their different requirements and expectations. So some require dual certification, some do not. Some districts require it and some do not. Content-based English language development is a type of standalone ELD instruction, which really lends itself to utilizing the content instruction to teach ELD instruction. So it's really utilizing that content theme, whereas your standalone ELD may have its own separate content or separate ELD curriculum and resources. And finally, we have newcomer programs. Newcomer programs really use a lot of different instructional models and sometimes different program types, but we have it under this instructional model umbrella, mostly because this is an instructional model that's designed specifically for newly arrived multilingual learners, with the idea that we're really providing extra scaffolding and support as they transition to new schools in the US and then ultimately transition into integrated content courses. So, and I appreciated seeing all of the wonderful pieces in the chat of the different models. I even saw that where some people are transitioning to some co-teaching in the upcoming year. So please reach out and let us know how that works, how that implementation works out for you. And as we look at our different instructional models and even our program designs, we want to be mindful of this balance. And you see it here on the screen that we want to balance the time. And Ayana spoke about it when she shared the Dear Colleague letter. We want to be able to balance that self-contained, segregated environment with transitioning students into more integrated opportunities. So we want to not only looking at making sure that our multilingual learners have full access to grade level content or opportunities for advanced coursework, we also want our content teachers to be able to have the tools that they need to support students in making that transition into those integrated courses. So I'm going to share this lovely tool. While I shared a very brief overview of some of those program types and instructional models, we have this resource, which is a synthesis of information on program types and instructional models based on the U.S. Department of Education's English Learner Toolkit, the Migration Policy Institute, and REL West. It can be a really great tool to use along with your state guidance when discussing program design with your stakeholders. And again, why in the world did we talk about program design? The whole purpose was to talk about scheduling. Well, if your program design impacts how you schedule students, and how you schedule students and your multilingual learners impacts how your program design is implemented. So it kind of gives us a nice foundation for all of us of thinking and grounding ourselves in that program design to inform scheduling. So in the chat, share with us your top challenge that you're facing with scheduling that impacts your multilingual learner programming. Time and staffing always seem to come up a lot. Graduation requirements, and keep putting those in there. And I think in our work with schools, we often hear challenges with scheduling, that you see here, that balancing content and ELD instruction, being able to access electives and advanced courseworks, the staffing piece that some of you are bringing up is in there, common planning time between content and ELD teachers, but just time in your schedule to be able to meet all of your students' needs. Another resource that we've put together, and I know some of you have kind of alluded to some things that we've shared are in our considerations in scheduling for multilingual learner education, highlight the challenges that you're speaking of, and provide some recommendations, again, as a nice advocacy tool to go along with those program models, program types and instructional models to advocate for some better scheduling practices. And you can access that anytime on that Padlet. Thank you, Jasmine. So now let's take a look at some strategies to strengthen scheduling for multilingual learners through some case studies. And as we looked in those considerations and then that infographic that Jasmine referenced in the chat, there's three major considerations that impact how we schedule our multilingual learners. First is our demographics. Then that program design that we unpacked a little bit. And exactly what you all shared, your staffing. Because how we look at these considerations greatly impacts how we can ensure that balance between program design and scheduling and ensure we're effectively leveraging our human resources. Because I think that's a piece that often gets forgotten. How do we utilize the people that we have? So we're going to take a look at those considerations through the lens of three different case studies. We'll follow those throughout this session to see how they looked at those components when planning some scheduling shifts. And you can learn more about each of those case studies in the article, Putting the Pieces Together, 3 Multilingual Learner Scheduling Case Studies. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of each of them as we unpack this morning. I was going to say this afternoon, but it's not this afternoon yet, not for another 13 minutes. So the first school we're going to look at is Sunnyside High School. They're a small urban high school, and the multilingual learner director and the high school principals there noticed an increase in their ML enrollment, particularly with their newcomer students. And that shift in enrollment was starting to move them from a medium size enrollment to a larger size enrollment. And they even looked at their five-year trends and some information from some community partners at the time, and noticed that they anticipated more newcomer students arriving in the upcoming and subsequent years. So they wanted to really look at including a newcomer program within their high school and what scheduling implications that they needed to consider as part of that. So as they started to meet and discuss scheduling changes and planning for those, they really looked at a few guiding questions. How could they ensure students in the newcomer program still have opportunities to integrate with fluent English speakers? Because oftentimes newcomer programs have that segregated model, and they wanted to really make sure they had opportunities to interact with students throughout the school. Did they have content teachers certified in both English language development and content? They really wanted to make sure those teachers were prepared to teach newcomer students. And along with looking at certification, they also looked at who were the teachers that they already knew had successful experience teaching multilingual learners, and how to continue to develop professional learning for these teachers in the newcomer program to hone those skills. And finally, they really wanted to make sure there was that time for collaboration, not just say that the teachers should collaborate, but really block off time daily for them to be able to collaborate on common strategies to support the newcomer students. So we're going to look at a schedule. This will be the first of many, so I apologize if you're not a schedule person, but it really does help to look at that context of how that schedule is built and how they looked at it within that context of multilingual learners. So I'll highlight a few things on here to draw our attention. For example, all the content teachers that were selected for the newcomer program at Sunnyside were either dually certified in ELD and content, or they were content teachers that were really strong educators that really had successful experiences with teaching their multilingual learners. In addition, period 8 every one of those teachers had common planning time that they could meet with each other to discuss students and collaborate on strategies. Obviously, they didn't meet every day, but they had the opportunity to meet every day. And as they rolled out their schedule, they did realize that teachers were meeting fairly regularly to talk about those needs. And finally, they knew they needed a foundational literacy course due to some of their newcomer students being identified as students with limited and interrupted formal education. So that leadership team approached their literacy specialist about developing and teaching their foundational literacy course for multilingual learners that were SLIFE. And you can see there was only one section of the foundational literacy course in their pilot year. However, that was something that they were considering on whether or not they needed more. So most importantly, yes, we have the schedules and how it fits in the teacher land, but let's take a look at what those schedules look like for 4 students at Sunnyside that were enrolled in the newcomer program. We have Charles, Josue, Josephina, and Maria. Charles came to Sunnyside with prior schooling, such as the equivalent of an Algebra 1 course and a strong foundation in science. And his enrollment screenings noted he was literate in French. For Josue and Josephina, they also came with prior schooling records, but had some academic gaps, or their coursework wasn't really aligning with the prerequisites for courses like Algebra 1. And their enrollment screenings also noted their literacy in Spanish and Portuguese. Maria, on the other hand, she recently arrived from Guatemala, and her primary language is Mam, but her educational experiences have been in Spanish. However, she hadn't been in school since the 5th grade and had gaps in her Spanish literacy. So when looking at that schedule for their newcomers, they really wanted to focus on an individualized assets-based approach for scheduling their students. So for Charles, he already came with some academic experiences. So instead of being in the newcomer program all day, he was a student part-time in the newcomer program. So some of his courses like history and his English ELD course were in the newcomer program, but he got to take biology and geometry integrated with other students as part of the general education curriculum. For Charles, Josue, and Josephina, they really focused on finding some electives that they could take so that they had some interest, but also that they could integrate with their peers at their grade level. Charles wanted to learn more French. He wanted to make sure he was developing his French skills. So he took AP French. Josue was interested in culinary arts, and Josephina wanted to learn more about web page design. So it gave them an opportunity to spend some choice time outside of the newcomer program. And for Maria, she needed to have that foundational literacy course within her schedule to build up some of her literacy skills. So one of the pieces that Sunnyside utilized and a tool that they utilized was the course progression mapping. This is a tool that can help you reflect on graduation requirements and consider the access your multilingual learners have to electives and advanced coursework similar to their peers. It can help you really map out all of your graduation requirements and see what is that progression or that pathway for your multilingual learners, and an opportunity for you to reflect on those, what you can do to change or expand that access. So in the chat, just share some of your reflections on thinking about Sunnyside. How did they utilize their demographics and staffing to make some shifts in their schedule? And what wonderings or takeaways do you have for your context? And by all means, Sunnyside is not a perfect model. I'm sure we could probably find some things, and they did too, of, things that they could do better as they moved into year 2 and year 3. But it does give them a good start. Um, and I think, yeah, the collaboration and teamwork, uh, taking in consideration what students are coming with, and keep those rolling. Yes, the lack of a standard model of really looking at students. I really love that about them. Um, so as we move into our next school, which is Seaside Middle School, this is a suburban middle school and has about a medium-sized multilingual learner population. Even though they're mid-size and you see that 30%, it's their school didn't have as many newcomer students. Their students were spread out across a variety of proficiency levels. So they were really they didn't have enough students for that newcomer program. So they were really looking at how they leverage their their ELD teachers to support content while also providing some standalone ELD instruction that might be needed for students. Mostly because they realized that students weren't making that expected progress in content courses or with their language proficiency. And they just realized their current schedule may not match that vision or that program design that they wanted to have. So as they met, they were really considering how to cluster their multilingual learners onto teams with teachers with successful experience teaching multilingual learners, mostly because at the current time, they were spread out across the entire school. They also looked at balancing that, again, that ELD teacher's time to provide standalone ELD instruction for newcomer students while also providing some in-class support for other multilingual learners at beginning and intermediate stages of language development. And again, a common theme that you'll see throughout all 3 schools is finding that time daily for teachers to be able to collaborate on strategies and supports for multilingual learners. So we're going to look at just a grade 8 schedule today, and and I'll just highlight again those major components. Seaside decided to schedule their MLs on 2 of their teams, Team Red and Team Blue. The other teams did not have multilingual learners on their teams. However, they did there were, as with any schedule, there's always that one-off where there might be multilingual learners on another team that they had to support. The teachers that were selected for Team Red and Team Blue were, again, those teachers experienced with teaching multilingual learners. They wanted to make sure their brightest and best were teaching their multilingual learners. And as you look, the multilingual learners, the newcomers, were scheduled into Section 1 on the red team and Section 5 on the blue team to be able to provide additional supports for them. Multilingual learners with more advanced proficiency levels, mostly those that were ready to that were bridging to an exited status, were scheduled throughout the other sections. Clustering the students on the 2 teams helped to prioritize their English language development teachers' time. They were able to still receive that standalone English ELD course with their ELD teacher. And then on top of that, they were able to have some integrated course time in history, math, and science with other students. Just like before, there was common planning time between the ELD teacher and the content teachers during period 1 and 2. For those of you out there going, wow, that's a lot of planning time, there was also professional learning that occurred during those 2 periods of time on opposite days. And then finally, the ELD teacher was able to provide some in-person, in-class support during history, science, and math. And this was the way they piloted it the first year, with ideas that they wanted to provide professional learning during that first year, especially for these two teams, on ways to co-teach, to see how they could improve upon the schedule, to make sure that they were meeting all the students' needs, but also to transition to co-teaching content courses in subsequent school years. So in looking at a few of the schedules, we're going to look at Maya, Manuel, Zane, and Lila. Just like our high school students, they came with different assets and different needs. Maya and Manuel had been in the school system, the school district there for several years, and had intermediate to advanced English language proficiency. In fact, Maya was close to exiting ELD services. Zane and Lila were the true newcomers. They recently enrolled at Seaside and are at those beginning stages of language proficiency. So you can see two of the students were scheduled on Team Red, while two of them were scheduled on Team Blue. Zane was in section 1 on the red team, Lila on section 5 of the blue team. So they got that designated ELD course for for the newcomers with the ELD teacher. And then you can see how they went to other courses with their peers.
Gesundheit, Kira.
The leadership team also wanted and decided to schedule Manuel in section 5. So he didn't have English with the ELD teacher, but she was in his courses for history, math, and science to be able to provide some of that additional in-class support because they noticed that he still needed some of that targeted instruction, English language development instruction during that time. And then finally, Maya, she was they decided she could be enrolled in any of the sections. She was so close to meeting the exit criteria. So the ELD teacher met with her during her advisory period at the end of the day to make sure she was on track, to provide some mini lessons for some language pieces that and skills that she might be missing or be struggling with a little bit based on her collaboration with Maya's teachers. So I feel like I gave a lot of information all over again. This is like way too much information sometimes because scheduling is a lot. But take some time to think about how Seaside utilized clustering their multilingual learners to best support their needs and some wonderings or takeaways that you have within your context. And I know while people are dropping that in, sometimes when we look at a high school schedule and looking at those pathways, we think of year 1 to year 4, but we know students come in all the time. So it is very tough. And I think that's another challenge of finding that way to make sure that as students are entering in, we're honoring the credits and some creative ways to balance some scheduling pieces and thinking about what students' needs are so that they can graduate, but that their schedule isn't just full of graduation requirements. And I'll just go back to this slide a little bit because there is still a lot of meaty information on there. And yes, again, that collaboration time, I think we don't build that in enough into our schedules to be able to give that time between that English language development teacher and our content teachers. So thank you for sharing all of those thoughts in the chat. And we are at our last school, Mountain Elementary. And Mountain is a rural school with a small size ML population that makes up about less than 10% of their school. And I know sometimes we've seen some percentages here. Sometimes 10% can still be a large number, and sometimes 10% can be a small number. So I think that's something that sometimes the percentage of students isn't necessarily indicative of the size of your population. So their population, even though it was 10%, was a small portion of that school, and their ELD population was rather small. And the ELD teacher and principal there at Mountain were really looking at the recommended classroom assignments for the upcoming school year and thinking about they have 2 ELD teachers within their building and thinking about how they can provide that targeted ELD instruction and supports, leveraging those 2 teachers. And they wanted to make sure that they were creating the schedules to leverage those 2 teachers while at the same time providing their multilingual learners with what they needed, especially the newcomer students that they have within their school. So they really were looking at shifting their program model to incorporate more co-teaching and really had to think about some other things other considerations that might impact those shifts. So again, it's very similar to Mountain since their staffing was part of the issue in terms of their scheduling. They wanted to really focus on how they could cluster their small numbers of multilingual learners with specific teachers at each grade level to maximize opportunities for the ELD teacher to provide in-class support, transitioning to opportunities for co-teaching. And then again, balancing that ELD teacher's schedule to provide standalone instruction for the newcomer students while also providing integrated in-class support or co-teaching for multilingual learners at all proficiency levels. And you'll see in terms of the schedule, there was a very high priority that they were placing on ample time for co-planning, not just co-planning amongst co-teachers, but also co-planning and collaboration among grade level teams, because we know even though students are identified for ELD services, they exit from those services and sometimes still need some support. So being able to collaborate across the entire grade level team to have some conversations about good strategies was important for Mountain. So for those of you who are not elementary oriented, this schedule looks a little different than we saw in terms of secondary. Levinson and James discuss micro-scheduling and macro-scheduling in their book, It's Time for Strategic Scheduling. The secondary schedules that we looked at previously look at that macro or high level approach because we can look at those big blocks of time. However, in terms of elementary, we need to look at more of a micro lens since we've got instructional blocks that are broken into smaller blocks. English language arts is, in this case at Mountain, a 90-minute block, but lots of different things happen in those 90 minutes. So we need to look at those smaller or micro components to be able to leverage the ELD teacher's time during strategic portions of those blocks. So I just wanted to highlight that as to why you might need to go deeper in looking at scheduling shifts at elementary rather than just looking at an ELA block or a math block. And I'll highlight those specific components that they focused on this schedule as well. So again, they clustered those students with classroom teachers with experience or certification so that their multilingual learners had the best teachers in front of them. And then co-teaching was really the priority during designated small group instruction time for ELA and math to provide an entryway into some co-teaching models. For example, the classroom and the ELD teacher, when she was there at co-teaching in grade 2, sometimes the ELD and content teacher would work together to teach a quick mini lesson on some academic language that students would use during small group or stations. Also, they got an opportunity to co-teach or co-design some stations for or small group instruction together. In addition, they had daily opportunities to co-plan with each grade level team and co-teacher on their caseload. Note that the expectation that Mountain had and the Mountain administration had was that co-planning occurred 3 days per 6-day cycle. So they weren't co-planning every day because that ELD teacher and the classroom teacher had other things to plan too. So they wanted to make sure they had ample co-planning time, but then honored the individual planning time that they had as well. And they integrated or leveraged their what I need or intervention time so that the ELD teacher could, in collaboration with the grade level teams, pull those newcomer students for some targeted English language development time. And that also provided a designated time throughout the year. Again, that came up earlier about rolling enrollments. We know that we don't just get newcomer students at the beginning of the year in August and September. They come in November or March. So this gave an opportunity for, as students became more proficient, they could be transitioned into another intervention time or another small group that was being instructed during that time, and newcomer students could be placed into that targeted group. And then finally, on days that the ELD teacher was not co-planning, she did regular check-ins with students to kind of progress monitor and see where they were academically and linguistically. So here are our last students that we're going to check in on and see what their schedules look like: Sarah, Samuel, and Maylin. Sarah's in kindergarten, Samuel's in grade 1, and Maylin is in grade 2. You can see Sarah and Maylin are at beginning stages of proficiency. Sarah is recently enrolled, even though she's in kindergarten, and Maylin is also a recently enrolled student at Mountain Elementary. Samuel, even though he's only in grade 1, he's been enrolled in school since kindergarten, and even I believe they even mentioned that he went to preschool. So he's had some schooling experience in the area. So in looking at their schedules, Sarah and Maylin are in that newcomer ELD group with the ELD teacher because she wants to really build their language proficiency skills. But then all 3 students are flexibly grouped during small group and stations to provide that ELD in-class support, and especially as they're transitioning to that co-taught time. So as Mountain was shifting their instructional model to include more co-teaching, they really leaned on tools like this, recognizing your expertise, because it can really help you identify between ELD teachers and classroom teachers that the roles and expertise each are bringing to develop that relationship and begin to co-plan instruction. So as we are closing at the end of Mountain, share some of the things that you notice in terms of Mountain's program design and how that drove some of their decisions, and any wonderings or takeaways that you might have. And I feel like you've all been doing this as I've been talking anyway, so I appreciate that. And I didn't have, we had this model for, Justine, I see your question about model for just one teacher in an elementary building. Bless your heart, or whoever it is that you're referring to, because one teacher, that is a lot. We didn't have that to share in from these case studies, but please feel free to reach out. Nope, I'm scrolling too fast now. So one last tool that I wanted to share before we do some goal setting is our scheduling planning document. This is a nice reflection tool that can help you analyze your demographics, your program design, and your staffing in order to determine your scheduling priorities. In essence, that's what each of these schools did. They went through this tool and really thought about each of those questions, and that really brought to light where they felt like their scheduling shifts need to be made. So as we close, think about how you want to strengthen your scheduling. And think about and reflect on your learning from this session. I know it was a very quick overview of all of those pieces, but share how you're feeling. I've got my broccoli people there. Maybe you're feeling 1, 2, or 3. Maybe you're feeling all of them. Maybe you're feeling none of them. Share how you're feeling and identify one of those pieces that you'll take away or a next step that you'll have based on your learning. And I appreciate that even through our chat, you're all supporting each other. I think that's what makes our community so great, that even during sessions, we're jumping in to help each other, supporting our students. I'm glad a lot of you are feeling number ones. I'm going to be honest, as I was even reflecting myself, I feel like there were times that I felt number 1, and then there were times I felt number 2, and there were times I felt number 3, and they probably happened within 30 minutes of each other when I was planning schedules. So it's okay to feel all the feelings. So as we're bringing this session to a close, just wanted to review what we aim to accomplish today of just describing those considerations for strengthening your ML programming, exploring strategies and tools to strengthen scheduling for multilingual learners through 3 case studies, and then allowing you that time to set some goals to strengthen your scheduling. And we know that you all have different roles, so think about how you can advocate at whatever your role is to improve and strengthen your scheduling. And as noted, you can provide us with feedback for this session using the form for this session available directly within that session block of the presentation under the feedback tab. We'd love your input, so feel free to submit your feedback after the session. I know I'd appreciate your feedback. We always love to make things better as we move forward with any of our sessions. And I do know that that feedback is coming between you and lunch. So make sure you give us that feedback and enjoy your lunch break from 12:20 to 1:30. And during that time from 1 o'clock to 1:30, feel free to jump into that fireside chat so that you can listen in to co-authors Dr. Diane Sayre-Fenner and Dr. Sydney Snyder as they take a deep dive in their upcoming book, Advocating for Multilingual Learners. And we have a few moments. Sydney, were there any big questions that came up in the chat that might be helpful to answer?
I think there were some questions about if you only have one teacher, and you talked about that, or differences between schools with larger populations versus smaller populations.
And you can see, like, I think with all of the with the 3 different schools that we highlighted today, each one of them have different contexts, and it's tough because, and I feel like I've talked about this recently with another school as well. It's very tough because every school's context, like, you have to bring in that context in, and along with that design that you have to make individualized decisions. It's not a lockstep pattern sometimes. And so it is a lot of creativity to be able to leverage staff. I feel like there's no easy answer. A lot of it is a lot of tough conversations that we've had in our technical assistance, of multiple conversations to kind of hone in how to make those changes, especially like Erica just put in about itinerant teachers over multiple schools, really balancing that time. I'm sorry that there are no easy answers. So it is 12:20. And thank you for sharing the love with your fellow colleagues that are spread amongst multiple places and spread thin. And please reach out again with to any of us, and you have my contact information. Please reach out if you have any questions. And have a great rest of your day.